Hello everybody, and a very warm welcome to the very first live question and answer session for Quilters Question Time in 2024. And as I'm just thinking about that, we began and released our first class in May 2019, so we are coming up to our 5th anniversary. It's not very far away, so that means we've done a lot of live sessions and we have answered a lot of questions, but we plan to do a lot more live sessions and answer a lot more questions. So we are ready for a brand new year, and I'm going to just hand you over to David so that he can say hello to you.
Hi everybody, we have lots of people on the chat already. I think we're on YouTube for the first time this week or this month, and the chat works a lot better on YouTube. Everybody can see what's going on in the chat, hopefully. So we have people who was first on. Susan Jenkins was first on. Apparently Susan was waiting for her photography live to start, and then she realised it was quilting that she was waiting for tonight. Helen Price from South Wales, Meg Reed, I'm just skipping through a few, Shirley Yule, Ricky Bull, Fran Jeffs, Patricia Curtis, Kathy Carroll. Hopefully you can all hear us okay, and we are good to go.
So we've got a lot of very good questions this evening, as we always do, but we always start with our members only prize draw, which is given to 2 people who are member subscribers to Quilters Question Time. And I need to dig for my little bag of numbers. Now usually Peter, my husband, comes in and draws out the numbers, but he's disappeared. I just heard him a few minutes ago hanging up his laundry, yeah, and now he's disappeared. But this month, what we are offering is a free Quilters Question Time class of your choice. So if there is a class that you have not bought and you would really like to have, and there are plenty to choose from, including curtain making classes, cushion making classes, lots and lots of different quilting classes, new ones, sashing and piece borders. So what we will be doing is drawing 2 numbers out, and at the end of this session David will let us know who those 2 lucky winners are. So 2 tickets coming your way. Thank David you. And you don't need to do anything. If you are a member, you are included in the prize draw. So we are now all teed up and ready for that. So don't rush off and have a look and see which classes you haven't got yet. Wait until the end of this session, okay? So question number 1, David.
Okay, so the first question of 2024 is from Thilo Pillay from Sawbridge in Hertfordshire in the UK, and there is a still that goes with this. I think I've got it teed up. Let me just check. Yes, I have. So Thilo says, thank you for the fantastic lessons. I've learned so many useful techniques since I joined. Please would you advise about the best way to sew these triangles together? And everybody should be able to see those triangles. What should I do to ensure that they all line up perfectly when I see the rows together? Thank you, Thilo Pillay.
Okay, and it looks beautiful, Thilo. You've got some gorgeous fabrics there and lots of variety in terms of your tonal value, which is something I'm always banging on about. You've got some nice scale changes as well, little prints and then bigger prints. So really, really lovely and interesting. So it is quite a tricky thing because you've got lots of seams coming together there, haven't you, in where those rows join up. And I don't know how big these sections are, so I haven't got a sense of scale on this. I imagine they're not too large, they're quite small pieces. Now then, what I think is that you need to, I wonder if you've got it, maybe if you win you could get this class if you haven't already got it. Something like the Feathered Star with the Lemoyne Star Centre is actually a good class for this kind of thing. Now what I'm going to suggest is, and it may already be too late, but I think if I was doing this I would have pressed my seams open at the assembly strip stage so that I had everything as flat as possible. Okay, you're going to put right sides together, obviously, and you want sharp pins. I really like these Clover 0.4 of a millimeter glass-headed pins because they go through like butter. Now, if you refer to the precision piecing class and you have a look at that, have a look at where we sew the strips onto the central square section. It's not quite the same, but you can pin in a similar way with lots of pins. So you're going to put a pin through just where the triangle is, and you're going to find the same place on the opposite triangle. And then when you've got that lined up, you pinch. So you're pinching right sides together, and you're pinching with your fingernails at the point where the pin is, so that you can open up to see whether you've got everything in alignment. And then what I do is I pin the seams on the diagonal on either side of those diagonal seams to really hold it in place. If you pin on the straight, it's not holding those seams together. So that would be my suggestion on that, and I would really press well before you even start to assemble the strip, so that you've got the flattest thing possible. And as I say, I think it's probably a little bit too late and you probably pressed to one side, but if you were to do it again and you pressed open, you would have the minimal amount of bulk there. So have a look at our precision piecing class and the pinning of the central section to the borders. However, if you look at your piece, Thilo, and I'm sorry to I don't want to discourage you, but you could have made this differently. And if it's something you're going to do again, you could eliminate the seam that joins those diamonds together completely. And so what you've got there is you've got a 30-degree angle. If we look at the top, could we just go back, David? So in the middle on the top, there's that blue and there's that dark black and white print, and that's a 30-degree angle. And then if you trace that around on the diagonal onto the blue the navy and paler blue print, you've got 60 degrees there. So what you could have done is cut diamonds and assembled a sort of diagonal strips, so that you totally eliminated the seam in the middle of those diamonds, and then you would have a whole load of diagonal strips that you could then sew together, which would make that easier and less bulky. So good luck with that. You've got quite a challenge ahead of you, but it will be well worth it. It's going to look fantastic. So plenty of pressing with steam on a firm surface, and just get your head around it and think, it's going to take a while, but I'm going to enjoy this. It's going to be really good, and I'm going to be so proud when it's done. So hopefully that is all helpful to you. Okay, thank you, Thilo. So the next question is from Molly Burgess from Tyler in Texas. And Molly says, hi Philippa, I've used so many of your quilting techniques over the years. You've been such an inspiration to me in my quilting journey. Thank you, Molly. It's always good to hear. I'm not getting any younger, and the one thing I really want to do is a whole cloth quilt. I did a small one, probably 30 by 30 years ago, and got a judge's choice, but I would like to make one that would be about 60 by 60. What kind of fabric do you recommend for a whole cloth quilt? Kaufman's Radiance was suggested to me, which is half cotton, half silk, but it only comes in a 45-inch width, and I would need substantially larger piece of fabric as a whole cloth, which, as you know, is not supposed to be seamed. And then any suggestions, would like to know suggestions for white fabric and also for any thread. And she says she has an in of a long arm for the quilting. So, Philippa. Okay, I'm chuckling because you've given yourself a rule there that I always say you don't have to listen to anything that is a rule. Now, I have made several whole cloth quilts, some large ones and some miniature ones, and the largest I think is something like, I think it's about 108 inches square, so it is very large. And guess what? It has got seams in it. I did not have a single piece of fabric that was the width that I needed. And what I did was I made the actual pattern on paper first. So I got large pieces of paper, stuck them all together, put them on the working wall behind me, which I can pin into. And then I made lots of paper templates in those swirling shapes and the leaf shapes that are in that particular large quilt, which is called white gold, and I talk about it in detail at the end of the whole cloth quilt class, which I'm sorry, I can't remember which series that's in, but anyway, okay. And so I drew out the design on this piece of paper. Now when I had got that design drawn on the piece of paper, I was able to see where my trapunto and my stitch motifs were in relation to just the background, and I put the seams in an area where there was the most background and the least motif, and I did 1/4 inch seams and I pressed the seams open, and you really cannot see where they are. You've really got to look for it, and that quilt won major awards in the UK and in the States, and there was never a comment about the seam there. So I would like you to just rethink that. I don't think you should have any problem with seams flipping up when you are long arming it. I did mine on a domestic Bernina sewing machine when I did the free motion, so I wasn't using a long arm. However, what you could do if you really wanted to secure those seams down is that when you've pressed them open, you could use water soluble thread just to stitch them down, because that would wash away after all the stitching was done. Okay, and I used a sateen fabric, and a sateen fabric differs from a regular plain weave in that with the plain weave it's over under, and then it alternates, but with the satin weave it can vary. But let's say it goes over 3 threads and under 1, and then it skips, and it goes over 3 and under 1, and it skips, and so on, and you get a kind of diagonal pattern on it. You get a little bit more sheen because there are longer floats on the top that reflect the light more, and I have to say to you that I wasn't convinced that it was the best choice, because what I found was that because it was an uneven weave, it kind of deflected the needle, and often the stitches were just a little bit kind of offset. So I would get some samples of fabric together. I mean, 2 or 3, possibly 4 fat quarters of the fabrics that you think you might like to use, including the one that's been recommended to you, which has the silk in it. And I would make up some little quilt sandwiches with batting, and you might be choosing different battings. I used 100% cotton for the main thing, and then I think I used 80-20. I can't remember. If you watch that class, it'll probably tell you. Make some samples and see what you like the look of. In terms of thread, you're going to try out threads there. I used 48 shiny rayon on the top. I think I used bottom line in the bobbin, but again, it's a long time since I made that quilt, so I can't quite remember, and that class again will probably tell you. So do some experimentation, don't hold on to rules, and it might be a really good idea to put a seam in your little samples so that you can see how the seam looks and performs as you are stitching, because I think you're going to struggle to come up with something really lovely quality fabric that you want to use in the width that you need. I think you'll find that what is in those wide widths for like quilt backings and things is not going to be fine enough. It's going to be too coarse and a bit too heavy. So I'm saying forget the idea of not putting a seam in it. I have done it, it works.
Okay, thank you, Philippa. The whole cloth quilts and embellished trapunto is class 3 in season 2.
Thank you.
If you want to see a lot more detail about how Philippa did that. Okay, thank you. The next question, well, it's not a question, it's just a comment really from Joe Holdway, and Joe says while she's making this, she's on a beach in Barbados revisiting the Mola class, so thinking of you, but she says she'll be back in Buxton with us on the 23rd. So Joe, I'm not sure whether you're here, but hopefully you had a nice time in Barbados.
Can I just interject there,
Yes.
David? So just talking of Barbados, so I have an uncle who is in a care home, and I went to visit him today because Tuesday at 1:30 is choir. Now my mum, this is the brother and sister, had the most amazing singing voice, but I've never heard my uncle sing, so I thought, oh, I'll go to choir with him today and we can sing along together all these old songs. So I get there, don't I? Get there on time, made a really big effort, and there's no choir today because the lady that holds choir is in Barbados. So all of you people in Barbados, she's probably sat next to you, Joe. You're probably teaching her how to do molar hand applique, aren't you? So yeah, no, we're not smiling. We're in the wind wind and the rain and the cold here in Yorkshire. We've had terrible storms, haven't we, over the last week or so, David? Anyway, have a lovely time.
Okay, so the next real question is from Susan Wold, and Susan says, we're having a family reunion in June, and I was asked to make a family tree quilt for the silent auction that we will have. I made a quilt that is 60 by 90. I followed your instructions and made a hanging sleeve. It has 3 openings for hanging, and I need to temporarily display this quilt on a wall for 3 days. What is the best way to do this? What should I use inside the hanging sleeve? Wire, wood dowel, what should I use to anchor to the wall? Because this is a rented venue, I can't use nails or screws. Any suggestions or advice would be much appreciated.
Well done you for doing the family tree. I wonder how many people you have had to represent in this quilt. We need a photo of this. It would be fantastic to see it. Maybe you'll supply us one for next time. Not sure when the event is, and I'm not sure how much time you've got, but yes, certainly.
June, she said.
June. Sorry. Sorry. Oh, you've got ages. Yeah. So maybe if you're keeping a secret, let us see it after June. Okay. My suggestion is that the best thing to do would be to try and borrow or even buy some kind of rail. Maybe you're part of a quilt group, or you have a quilt friend that has some kind of rail that you could borrow. But if not, what you actually need is a photography stand, and one that is suitable for backdrops, because what it will have is 2 support stands on either side with tripod legs, and then there'll be a bar that goes across, and you'll be able to just thread your hanging sleeve onto the bar, and then that means that you'll be able to move it out of the way. You know, there'll be lots going on probably, certainly if it's a 3-day event. I think this is amazing. 3-day family reunion sounds absolutely fantastic.
Big family probably.
Yeah, big family, and that just gives you more capabilities, and everybody will be able to see it. They'll also be able to see the back of it. So I think, you know, it shouldn't cost too much. Do you have an idea what that might be, David? You've bought several over the years, haven't you?
No.
Yeah, you know, our favourite shop that none of us ever shop at, but we do shop at, you should be able to get one fairly inexpensively, I would think. So that would be my suggestion. I think that's your easiest thing.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that helps. The next question is from Susan van der Plurg, and Susan says, I used the stitch in the ditch on my recent project. I had, actually this is another comment, sorry, this isn't a question. She's just saying how much she appreciates the classes. So she's looking forward to learning them again. Well, thank you for that, Susan. I don't think there's anything to ask you about on that one. So I'm going to move on to the next one, Philippa, which is from Maureen and from Tennessee. And Maureen says, I have a question about binding and piping. Philippa says to quilt beyond the outer edges of the quilt, but what do you do if you have borders? I'm a long arm quilter and I placed designs in the borders, and I want all the stitching visible on the finished quilt. Thank you for any advice. And that's from Maureen. Okay,
so thank you, Maureen. And also thank you, Susan. And it was particularly the stitch in the ditch that you'd had great success with. And I will just say, stitch in the ditch sounds like it's really easy, but there is a skill and techniques to it. And you need to know where you're supposed to be stitching. So I'm very pleased, Susan, that you had good success with that. And thanks for letting us know. But back to Maureen. Now, the reason that I like to have all of my quilting stitching going right kind of beyond the finished edge of the quilt. So when I make the quilt and I'm layering up the quilt back and the wadding and the top, I have extra fabric there, because what I personally prefer, and I think you get a better finish with it, is if the binding is full of quilted quilt. Because if you just sort of stitch up to a particular point and then you have unstitched quilt that you're going to bind, the binding often doesn't lay very flat because there's a different handle to the different areas in the quilt. And I do address this in our new second version of piping and binding. And what I do is I show you that if you don't have stitching because of the particular design that you are doing in the area where the binding is going to to go, then I stick to it, often with a very wide zigzag, something like that. So it could be 2 rows of zigzag, and 2 rows of zigzag would work for me because I like to do a wide 1/2 inch binding. But what that gives you is the same kind of structure and flatness and handle of the area of the quilt that's going to have the binding over it as the rest of the quilt, and you tend not to get wavy edges and a much smoother finish. So that is what I would suggest. And if all of you have got version 2 of piping and binding in your libraries, and even those of you that joined a long time ago, if you've got version 1, which is one of the very first classes that we filmed, and then we filmed it again recently, and we added a lot more content. So if you haven't looked at it, please do have a look at it, because it's got that, but it also chats about things like completely machine sewn bindings and more. So lots of info there, and well worth a visit if you haven't had a look.
Okay, thank you for that, Maureen. So the next question is a sewing machine question, and it's from Sharon Tooby. Sorry, Sharon. I have been lucky, she says, I have been lucky enough to purchase a Bernina 770 QE thanks to her NHS pension. And as an aside, she says, believe me when I say I well and truly earned it after more than 3 decades as a midwife, and we can believe that too, Sharon. I want to ask Philippa, what are her top tips for getting the most out of my machine, and what is her favourite accessory foot? Well, I think I know the answer to this, having watched some questions, but let's see what Philippa has to say.
Well, congratulations on your retirement, Sharon, and I'm sure you've had a really fascinating, interesting career and seen many things, but I'm sure it was a lot of hard work. I would be very interested to know how many babies you think that you have delivered in 3 decades. Your next job, you know, Sharon, is you haven't finished yet. Yeah, we have the program, you probably get it in the States as well, Call the Midwife, and it started off, when did it start off? Kind of after the Second World War, and they're now up to the late 60s. So when they get into the 80s and 90s, you'll be able to give them advice, won't you, on what actually happened then. So, and it is one of those programs. Do you ever watch it, David? It makes you cry. No. It makes Peter, my husband, cry when he watches it. So emotional. Anyway, so I have 2 Bernina sewing machines. I have a 710 and a 720, so not quite as sophisticated as the ones that Sharon has just treated herself to. My top tips for all of your sewing machines, and this is not just Berninas, this is everything, is don't expect to know your sewing machine straight away. I think it takes you 3 to 4 months of quite a lot of sewing to really get a feel for your machine and know how it works. But I think the most essential thing is that as soon as you get your machine, you read the manual from cover to cover. Now, you may have lost your manual, but lots of manuals are available online these days. So it's well worth looking if you can't find it. Keep your manual close by where you can always find it and refer to it often. If you read it initially like a novel from cover to cover, you will find out about all kinds of things that you didn't even know that it was possible to do with your sewing machine. And the thing with a lot of our more expensive computerized machines is they also have a kind of inbuilt manual, and this particular sewing machine does. So what also I want you to do, Sharon, is your screen has all kinds of information. Use that all the time, but don't think that replaces your paper physical manual. It's really important, okay? So I think that is really, really important. And David, I refer to mine often, don't I? You know, when we're filming classes, you know, might be doing an operation that I don't do very often, and I can't remember it all. The machines are so sophisticated, okay? Keep your machine clean and oiled, okay? And I'm going to come back to that in a moment. It's really important that you look after it. I lived in Saudi Arabia for 15 years, and there was nobody that I would trust to service my sewing machines. And so for 15 years, I just cleaned them and oiled them, and they worked beautifully. Brought them back to the UK, had it serviced, and the machine came back broken. So if you look after it, it will really, really look after you. And then my favourite foot, my absolute favourite foot is my 37 1/4 inch foot, which I use for practically all straight stitch. garment making, quilt making, upholstery, you name it, because it holds the work securely, but I've got really good visibility at the needle point. So I never use the kind of regular number 1 foot for just general purpose sewing. Always, always, always the 37, a 1/4 inch foot without the guides. I do not like guides. So what I just want to come back to, and David might want to chip in here, we're just going to, we're going to start next month, and we're going to do... just... And is that me coming back at myself?
I was just checking to see what was going on the live from the other thing.
We're going to do an occasional series, so it's not going to be kind of regular every month, but an occasional live session where I will be discussing a particular subject and doing a lot of demonstration, and then there will be questions afterwards. So more kind of...
class.
It's a class really, yeah, and it will last an hour long. The first one is going to be on Wednesday the 7th of February. I've just put my calendar down at 7 o'clock. We will let you know about this. This is going to be, you will have to buy this and you will join us, and if you can't join us, if you buy it, it will go into your library. So but the first one that we are doing is going to be all about your sewing machine. So I'm going to be talking about cleaning and needles and threads and feet and looking after your sewing machine, tension, top and bottom, all the kind of nitty gritty things that you really need to know and may not know. So we will let you know more detail about that in the not too distant future. Did you have anything?
Do it on the 7th, yeah.
It is, so it's going to be Wednesday the 7th of February, and that is going to be a paid lesson which is going to be live. You'll be able to ask questions, but it will be recorded. It will go into your library. So it sounds like Sharon might be the first person to sign up. Not just Bonina's sewing machine, any sewing machine. Okay.
Okay, sorry, I'm playing with lots of different buttons tonight, and I'm also trying to look at the chat. We're interested to know how you think it's working tonight. I think the chat works better with YouTube than it does on the other one, because everyone can see what's going on in the chat without having to refresh. So that's good. And I am watching the chat. So Gillian Hibbard, I will come back to your question at some point. And Sonia Wilson says, "Oh, that class sounds fantastic." So there's a few people making comments in the chat, and I just want you to know, everyone to know, that I'm watching those. So next question is from Karen Hansen, and Karen says, "Hello, Philippa and David. I know I've asked this question before, but would you be so kind as to answer it again? And I promise to write down your answer." Okay. We'll hold you to that one, Karen, I think. So, why does my binding twist? I think you called it roping. So, Philippa, why does Karen's binding twist?
Do you know, I'd just love to be in the room with you, Karen, just to see, because it's always so helpful. So I'm just kind of guessing with this. But I like to cut, when it's a straight edge quilt, I like to cut my binding parallel to the selvage on the straight grain. I only cut my binding on the bias if it's a wavy or curved edge quilt. I think you get much better results with a straight cut strip. And cutting parallel to the selvage is the least stretchy grain, even across from selvage to selvage, there is some stretch in that. So I am imagining that Karen is doing that, and she's cutting parallel to the selvage. I do the joins on the 45, press the seams open. That is the least bulky and the neatest. But I imagine that what is happening is that there is some movement of the strip as it goes through the sewing machine. So I don't press my binding strip in half lengthways, I just fold it. But maybe, Karen, you should try pressing it in half lengthways. The reason I don't do that is I find the bit that's on the inside, because a double folded binding, is a little bit smaller than the bit that's on the outside, and so I find that the crease is not quite in the right place. But that just might help to stabilize it. Now, what I wonder, Karen, is if, as you are applying your binding and it's folded in half, yeah, the raw edge, so here's the raw edge of the quilt, the two raw edges of the folded binding are lined up with the quilt. I wonder if the top layer is getting stretched and pushed over the underneath binding layer, and so it's not laying flat, and you are giving yourself a slight by us when it is actually sewn on. So I'm going to suggest that your stitch length is about 3 or even 3.5. If your stitch length is a little bit longer, it gives the fabric somewhere to go within each stitch. Okay, it helps. And I really think that if possible, and there's no piping there, that you use your walking foot that will help to move it through and stop those that top layer pushing over. If you've got piping, you won't be able to use your walking foot. So I think it's either plenty of clips or pins or basting, but something to really hold all of those plies together as you stitch, and try not to stretch or let anything get pushed out of alignment. So that is my best guess on that, Karen, without seeing what you're actually doing. So hopefully that will help you. Oh, and the better quality the fabric, the more tightly woven, like a cotton poplin or a batik or something like that, the less it will stretch. So if it's a very sort of open weave quilting cotton, it's more likely to do that when you are actually stitching in place. So the fabric can make a difference.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So send us a photo of you having written that one down, and we'll no, I'm just joking. Okay, so but that's good. It's a question that comes up a lot, so it's definitely worth going through that again. Okay, some people on the chat. Lots of people like the new chat format with YouTube, so that's good. A few people have said, how do we sign up for the class on the 7th? Philippa and I have really only agreed the final details on that tonight, so we haven't formalised a sign-up page and that sort of thing yet. I will send it out to you in the next few days. It may not be tomorrow, because I think we're filming another class tomorrow, which Philippa will talk about in a minute. But hopefully by the end of the week we'll have a sign-up form for you. We're going to make it fairly inexpensive, I think, and even if you can't make it live, you will be able to purchase the replay, and then it will stay in your library, so you'll be able to come back to it if you need to. So that's fine. There was another question. Kate says, a recent class suggested an ordinary foot, not a 1/4 inch foot, as it holds the fabric more securely. I'm not sure whether that was one of your classes, Philippa, or not. Visibility is rubbish though with a multi-purpose foot. Have you got any comments on that?
Yeah, so just as I said, really, I find that my 1/4 inch foot holds the work as securely as the regular just straight stitch foot, and because it's got that open toe, the visibility is so much better, and it makes all the difference in the world. So I mean, I have to say to you that the regular general purpose foot, I don't think it's ever been on the sewing machine. If it has, it'll be about twice in its entire life, and the sewing machine is about 10 years old now, so I really don't use it, and find that I don't need to use it.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question. This is from Jill Metcalf, and Jill says she's now on series 2. She's watched series 1 from Vietnam, where her son lives, from France, where she lives, from Wakefield, where her second home is, and from Spain, where her cousins live. So that's one of the advantages of online classes, I guess. As long as she's got Wi-Fi, she's happy. She has a question about jelly rolls. She's been given a jelly roll of Moda fabrics. Normally she decides on the pattern and focus fabric first, but this has thrown her. We don't have a picture, I don't think, but she said it was browns and paisleys, I think. Any ideas for how she could use a jelly roll like that? She doesn't want to waste it.
Okay, well, you truly are international. I mean, we are an international group, but not many people are watching us from 4 different countries in the world. So I think we're going to have a competition now, aren't we, to see how many countries a single person has watched us from. Okay, but well done on that, Jill. Right, a jelly roll, so lots of strips, but actually not as much fabric in it as you might imagine. We had a conversation about this recently, didn't we, on one of the other lives, and a lady was making a Bargello quilt, and I suggested she got a second jelly roll so that she had something of a reasonable size. I'm not a massive fan. I found that they're often cut slightly off grain, and so you're not sort of the true grain. They're a little bit off grain, and I'm not very keen on that pinked edge. So I don't really use them very much. In fact, I was given one, and I started to make something with it, which I can't even remember what it was, and it ended up going to the charity shop, to the thrift shop, because I wasn't enjoying the process. But there are tons of books and tons of information online. So if you just Google jelly roll quilt and then click on images, you'll see tons of things that have been made that should give you inspiration. And also there are lots of books, but I'm not going to kind of fib to you and say, you know, it is an area that I have delved into, because it isn't. But things like rail fence quilts, where you're cutting strips and you perhaps 3 different coloured strips together and you're alternating vertical with horizontal, that kind of thing. But just tons of ideas online. So I am going to kind of fob you off a little bit there in a way, but it isn't something that I have explored in detail, and so I don't feel that I am qualified to give you lots of pattern ideas. But you will have no trouble finding books and inspiration, pictorial information online. Okay,
next question. Now this is 2 questions in one, I think. This is from, the first half is from Elaine Evans, and Elaine says, I can no longer hand stitch the reverse of the quilt binding. I'll be using my machine, but I'm not sure which is the best foot to use, my walking foot or an edge foot, and should I stitch on the front or the reverse? And now I did message Elaine, because the new piping and binding class does have Philippa's instructions for how to do machining of the binding, and we have a question which came in on the chat from Gillian Hibbard, and Gillian says, can machine stitch binding be used on a competition quilt, or would it be marked down? So Philippa, which is the best foot, and can it be used on a competition quilt?
Okay, so we have over time had a lot of requests for a machine sewn binding, which wasn't showed in our first piping and binding class, and so we have added that in great detail to the new class, and I give you options on which foot to use. But the difference between the completely machine sewn binding and the machine sewn and hand finished binding is that the original machine sewn but hand finished, the binding was sewn from the front and then it went to the back of the quilt, and the hand finishing was on the wrong side, or the back side of the quilt. With the completely machine sewn thing, the binding is sewn on from the back and then comes over to the front and then is machined from the right side, so you can see what you're doing, you can get the neatest finish. And I show how to do that with and without piping, and I show it with a walking foot and with a zipper foot, and chat about all the options. Now, I do not have any problem with a complete machine sewn binding on competition quilts. Again, it's one of those kind of rules that I just think doesn't even exist. I think there are no rules. You do whatever you want, but it has to be beautifully done, because if it's not beautifully neat, it's not the best quality. It's not going to win top prizes, is it? So I don't think it matters how it is sewn in terms of technique, but what I think really matters is that it is beautifully done, and I hope that in our class we show you how to do it really beautifully. So do have a look at the new class.
Okay, so we're on question 11, and we've got 22 questions on the list. So we will speed up a little bit,
yes.
I think. So the next question is from Meg Reed from Vermont in the USA, and Meg says, I'm new to quilting and finding your class is wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you for saying so, Meg. You've spoken about using quality fabrics that are tightly woven. When ordering fabric online, sometimes they give the weight or the GSM. My question is, what is a good weight or GSM for quilting fabrics if I'm buying online?
Okay, so Meg, no rules on any of this. I have used all kinds of fabrics over the years, and it depends what you are doing. So for example, if I'm making a miniature quilt, which is less than 12 inches, less than 30 centimeters, I need my fabric to be as fine as possible, else I'm just not going to be able to get the detail. There's going to be too much bulk, and I would use something like a cotton lawn. I'm going to chat a bit more about this. If I'm doing a larger quilt, quilt, but I still want high quality and I want precision and I want flat seams and I don't want bulk, then I will use something like a cotton poplin, which is also very tightly woven. And for those of you that know, Art Gallery Fabrics is a brilliant example of this. If you haven't bought any Art Gallery fabrics, which are American but widely available in the States and the UK, get yourself a fat quarter and feel the difference. But if I was doing something quick and big pieces and it didn't need lots of precise work, then I might choose a kind of conventional quilting cotton, which is a bit thicker, because I'm not trying to get really precise finishing and really precise results. So a cotton lawn will range from 70 to 100 grams per meter. 100 grams is about 3.5 ounces if you are not metric. A cotton poplin will be about 110 to 130 grams, and then a more conventional quilting cotton will be 140 grams plus. So that's a very kind of brief outline of that, but that should give you some idea. But think about what you are doing and the type of fabric that you need. And I am not a huge fan of a lot of quilting cottons because they are loosely woven, they're not great to work with, and they don't stand up to lots of washing and wear. So wherever possible, the higher quality, like the Art Gallery, like batik, something like that quality is preferable. If you're going to put all that work into it, you want it to have a good long life, and we all want to have a good long life.
Okay, some more comments. Sonia Wilson's asked me a question about her membership. We're not going to sort that out now. Sonia, if you email help@quiltersquestiontime.com, we can sort out any membership issues. And Louise Jessup says, how great to do it this way. I can put you on my TV, so that's good. So that's good. So the next question is from Barbara Wellett, and Barbara from Maine. And Barbara is wondering if Philippa ever does a flange binding, and if so, why, and if not, why not?
Okay, so often with my quilts, I will put a piping, so a cord with a bias cut strip of fabric stitched over it before I put the actual binding on. The quilt behind me actually has 3 rows of piping and then a 1/2 inch wide binding, and I have never made a quilt with a flange, and the difference between the flange and the binding is that the flange is just a strip of fabric that is pressed in half and adds that little splash of colour, but it doesn't have the cord in it. Okay, I don't like the look as much as a piped finish. I really like piping. I am a girl that made a lot of pipe dresses in the 1980s, and I just love it. Love piping everything, cushions, the whole thing. Okay, I think it is easier to do a piping than a flange because you've got a physical cord inside that fabric strip. It's much easier to keep it neat and consistent in its width, whereas if you've got a flange, if you're stitching, wanders in and out a little bit, or you haven't positioned that strip of fabric properly, you will get a difference in the width of that little flange of fabric as you go along the edge of the quilt. So I just prefer a piping. So I think it's unlikely that I'm going to change, Barbara, but who knows?
Okay, so a couple of questions about, I think people have answered the question, what were you talking about the lightest fabric? I think it was cotton lawn, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which is LAWN, is that right? So that's been answered in the chat as well. So the chat is working well. And if you remember, you get to chat in our Quilters Question Time Facebook group, and again, lots of answers to questions which come up there. So the next question is from Judy Pryke, and Judy says, and we've got a picture with this one. So this one, she's sending a picture of some fabric which she has been given to turn into cushions or a lap quilt for charity. Some is beautiful Liberty Lawn, some quilt fabric from Riley Blake, some pieces have Visaline, is that?
Yeah.
I've organised them into dark, medium, light as best I can. Well done, you've obviously watched Philippa's classes. How do I begin to turn this collection into something? Would cushions be better? How do you mix different weights? Any suggestions gratefully received? And that's from Judy.
Okay, so Judy, we don't know anything about the charity, the kind of group that the charity is working for, where this might be kind of passed on, what's happening. So it's a little bit hard to know. I mean, I don't know if they're for kids or adults or what. So what I would say to you is you need to think about the end usage, so that if it's, say, for little children, it's something that's going to be washed often. You know, if it's going to go to an older person, maybe they would take care of it more. Just that kind of thing. I would tend to keep them in their light, medium, darks, but I would also try to put similar weights of fabric together. So if you've got lots, and you've got a lot that have been fused onto an interlining, you know, that you might keep all of those together and then heavier weights together and so on, because it's going to be harder to sew lots of different weights together, and also they're going to react differently and wear differently over time. So I would tend to organise in terms of fabric type, and I would think very carefully about your design and keep it fairly simple. I mean, fairly big pieces if you've got fairly large pieces of fabric to use. Keep it dynamic with lights, medium and dark, but don't put masses and masses of work into it in either the piecing or the quilting, because people that don't do this type of work don't have an understanding of how much effort and time goes into it. But just as a general rule, I tend to kind of put them together in terms of weights and whether they've been fused or not, and have that as your starting point.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that helps, Judy. So the next question is from Fran Jeffs, who I think I've seen online, and we have a picture for this one. And I love this picture when we saw it in the YouTube. You posted this, I think, on the YouTube group as well, Fran. I'm looking forward to trying YouTube. My question this month is around design. I'm loving the lessons, just completed trapunto in year 1, and I would love to design something smallish to incorporate the technique. Are there any design classes you offer or know about? Here is my attempt. Well, I think it's a brilliant attempt. I just love this.
So yeah, it's fantastic roller skate. You've done such...
Sorry, you keep going. I'm pressing the wrong buttons.
Done such a nice job with it. It looks really super. It's really beautifully done. And you've got lots of nice stippling around the edge so that your trapunto roller skate really stands out against its background. I mean, Dave and I were chatting about this. I mean, I think all of the classes talk about design in some way as I am working through. So it doesn't really matter what it is. I'm talking about design, whether it is in terms of balance or composition, or use of colour or use of fabric. And I do think that as you watch the fabric and the classes and you progress through, you're picking things up all the time. And I do think there's lots that can be learned, and I do think some of it is intuitive. But in the whole cloth and embellished trapunto class, which is in season 2, I've already mentioned it. There's a big whole cloth quilt called White Gold. I explain in detail at the end of that class how that quilt was made and how I went about the design and the process. And I work a lot with paper, and so I often create shapes, motifs in paper, and maybe 3 motifs. So let's say if I just think about one quilt, which is the bird by bird, there's a bird and a heart and a swirl. There's 3 different motifs, and I will create them in at least 3 sizes. The 3 sizes being significantly different so that you can tell the difference. They've got a small, a medium and large. They're all not all just slightly different. And I cut those out in paper and I arrange them on a paper background, and I create a composition visually using the paper templates. And that's how I did the whole cloth quilt. That's how I got the design for the whole cloth quilt. It's how I work in lots of ways. So do if you are going to go on to season 2, that is a really useful class. But as I say, all the classes, I mean, the bird by bird turned edge applique class, that talks about the process and how I went about making that quilt, and it's just the same kind of design ideas, just the techniques are different. One is applique and I'm stitching fabric onto a background, the other is just stitch on a background, but the starting point is exactly the same. Yeah, maybe that's a good topic for one of our Philippa's foundation lessons. Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully that's helpful, Fran. The next question is from Pat Molliker, and there is an image for this, what I haven't teed up yet, so I'll show you that one shortly. And Pat says, why do I sometimes lose my points? I think I'm being careful with piecing and paying attention to a scant 1/4 inch seam, but this still happens, and I will show you the picture.
So Pat, we don't want you to lose the points. We don't want anyone to lose the points. Okay, thank you very much for sending those pictures. That is great, and I really super contrast there with the fantastic green and red against the white background. So if we look at the image that is on the left hand side of your screen, and if we look at the left hand side of that image, we've got a green square at the top, and then there is a half square triangle with white and red below that. And if you look at the bottom of that half square triangle and you trace across to the right side, you will see that it doesn't line up there, does it? Now then, the points are pretty good on that one. You haven't really lost much of a point, but what I feel I can see on that half square triangle unit is it looks more rectangular than square. It looks longer than it is wide. Now that might be to do with the angle of the photograph, but I think not. So that could be in initial cutting out, it could be in squaring up, and it could be in the seam allowance. Now I don't do a scant 1/4 inch, I do a 1/4 inch seam. Yeah, I use fine fabrics and fine thread. Thread creates bulk and it stops you getting things pressed really flat. So I wonder if it is a combination of cutting and of seam allowances. You have to make sure that when you're putting things right side together, that the raw edges are absolutely in alignment with one another. Sometimes the underneath piece sort of escapes and goes back from the top piece, and then that has a shorter seam allowance, a less wide seam allowance. So your seam allowances need to be consistent on both sides and consistent all the way along their length. And I've got a lot of tips for helping you do that in the precision piecing class, using leader strips, all kinds of things like that. Straight stitch plate, which just has a small round hole, is really important for precise work. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, the next time you make a block, is really take care with your initial cutting out as you are starting to create the units before you start to assemble them together. So let's say you've got half square triangles, really make sure they are the correct measurement before you start to assemble them into units. And when you are assembling your units, look critically at all of your seams, make sure that they are consistent. Don't do a scant 1/4 inch seam, do a 1/4 inch seam. Check your foot. Is your foot accurate? Sometimes sewing machine feet are not accurate and they don't give you a 1/4 inch foot. I am not a fan of feet with guides. I think they splay out, they don't help you be accurate. And press with steam on a firm surface for crisp results. So I think it is attention to detail at every stage, and I want you to really analyse what you do and find out, be your own detective and find out where it's not quite going as you want it to.
Okay, thank you. So lots of things to think about there. Okay, the next question is from Connie Wheeler. And Connie says sadly she's babysitting, so she won't be able to watch the live show, but she has a question. She's starting the Pick a Petal BOM with the quilt show, and
block of the month.
Block of the month. That's right. I knew that. With the quilt show, and the first block has Y seams. She says she's had a go at white seam, but I either seem to get a gap, or I've got in a pickle's nest of seams, or my fabric disappears down the throat of the machine. Lots of people have problems with Y seams. Philippa, how can you help, and can you give any suggestions to Connie on Y seams?
Yes, I can, Connie. So straight stitch play, if you've got one, just mentioned it in the previous question, really important. Fine thread, really fine needle. Now there are two classes that immediately spring to mind with Y seams. The first is the paper piecing class, where I sew hexes by machine and get really accurate results. It's also in the Jack's chain class, but it's not the only one. I put a little dot 1/4 of an inch back from the raw edge of the seam that I'm going to sew, and I stitch up to the dot, and then I reverse or turn it round, stitch back and really anchor it, but the final 1/4 inch is unstitched on all of the seams. I'll show you in detail in those classes. Please have a look. Good luck.
And I did check, Connie, and you have every class in season 1 and season 2, so I know that you've got that, and you should be able to go and have a look. Okay, we're doing well. Next question is from Patricia Curtis, and Patricia says, I've been hearing that some long arm quilters require or appreciate a quilt that has been stay stitched along the border prior to being loaded on a long arm machine. I've not had the need to do this on my domestic machine, but there is one quilt I really would like to send to a long armer. What are your thoughts on this? And I will put up a picture of Patricia's quilt.
So thank you, Patricia. It's actually a really good question and not one that we have been asked before, so well done on that. I imagine the reason is that a lot of people press to one side and they don't anchor, they don't do a little reinforcing stitch, a little back stitch, a little stitch in place at the end of the seam. And so when the long armer gets the quilt top and puts it onto her long arm machine, she will find that the seams at the outer edge of the quilt start to come undone. And if it was stay stitched all the way around the edge, 1/4 of an inch in from the edge, it would stop that happening. I personally always do a back stitch at the start and beginning of every seam, however short it is. You see that in the precision piecing class, every piecing class that we do, I show you how to do that. It makes all the difference. I tend to press my seams open, but they do not come apart. So if you want to just revisit those precision piecing and any of the piecing classes, you will see that. So I would chat to your long armer and ask them what they want, and then do what they want. And if you do what they want, they will make the best job for you, because you care about making their job as easy as possible. So if you love each other, you will get the best results.
Okay, Kate was just saying, what were the classes with the Y seams? It was the Jack's chain quilt and the hexie, what's
the paper piecing, and it's not
class.
the only one, and I'm just trying to think what else, possibly in the feathered star with the, yes, with the Lemoyne Star Centre, and it'll be in something else as well, but yes.
Okay, so those are classes with that in. Right, we've done Patricia's. The next question is from Claire Thompson, and Claire says, what is Philippa's recommended version of doing a binding on a quilt straight edged with a flange? Do we have this question already, or have I?
It's a very similar question.
Okay.
I'll answer it very briefly. Okay, so the flange, instead of a cord covered with a bias cut strip of fabric, it is just a pressed strip of fabric pressed in half. As I said previously, it's not my most favourite method, but I would do the corners in exactly the same way as I do the piping. Okay, so have a look at that, and that will show you how to do that, Claire. I finished, David.
I know, I'm just trying to work out what... I think I've got a photo for the next one, and I can't find it, so I'm going to go on to question 20. I've got a photo for this one as well, so that's stuff, mate. We'll do question 21, which and I haven't put your name in here, I'm afraid. This one came in late this afternoon. Philippa, your views on quilting sewing machines and whether they are worth the investment, or is it worth sticking with a domestic sewing machine? I have a Singer heavy duty 4423. Also, I love your beginner quilting course. Thank you for making quilting achievable for a novice like myself. And I'm really sorry that I haven't got your name on my question list here.
Okay, it's a good question. So I trained as a clothing designer. I made garments for many years, and when I began quilting in 1996, things that were labelled quilting machines did not exist, and I sewed absolutely everything on my domestic Boninas 1130 and 1260, and I won huge awards, including Best of Show at AQS. You do not need a quilting machine. It is a bit of a gimmick. You might get some slightly different feet, but you can get those feet anyway. There's no difference. It is just basically about feet. I think that the machine that you should use is the machine that you enjoy sewing with and that gives you the results you want. And with most of our quilting, we are just using straight stitch. So a heavy domestic sewing machine that's probably metal and not plastic and is really sound will do really sterling work for you for many, many years, as long as you keep it clean and oiled and you look after it. So I you know, in a classroom situation, a lady will kind of apologise for a little old machine. It's crazy, you know. The only thing I think with older machines is that if they're not electronic, they don't have the needle down function, which I find really, really important. I find it very difficult to sew without that, having got used to it. But don't apologise to the machine. If you enjoy working with a particular machine and it gives you the results you want, you do not need to spend a ton of money on a sewing machine. Just use what you've got. The most important thing is that you sew. That is how you get really good at it. Okay,
so we're coming toward...
Not equipment.
Pardon?
Commitment, not equipment.
Peter's back in the room.
Did you hear that? Did
No.
they hear that? So Peter's just sat watching Proceeding, Peter Weisman, and he said commitment, not equipment, and we will wholeheartedly agree with that. However, some equipment is nice, Peter. I mean, if you've been in Peter's shed and seen all the power tools, he's not just working with one spanner, one screwdriver, and an old handsaw.
Okay, so moving on quickly. The next question is from Norma, I think it is. I hope so, because I haven't got your name on here, but I have got a name on the picture. And let's put the picture up. So Norma says, I've recently completed a quilt top and I'm at a loss as to how to have my long armour quilt it. I use all cafe fabrics, onion patterns for the corners and edges, shark's teeth for the sashing. Any ideas as to the quilt pattern? By the way, this is for a granddaughter's 18th birthday, and she is just as colourful as the project. So.
Okay, it is a great quilt and I love that sashing fabric. It gives it such a sense of movement, and what it does is it takes square blocks and makes them look wavy. It's really brilliant. It really is a fantastic choice. And so what I'm seeing there in terms of quilting is circles. I think you should chat to your long armour about circles, because that will continue to accentuate that really clever use of fabric. So circles, chat to your long armour about circles. I keep answering too quickly and David's not ready.
I'm still teeing up the next question. Okay, we're good to go. So the next is not a question. This is, some of you who are in the Facebook group will have seen this. This is a very proud grandmother showing a picture of her granddaughter who took first place in the Young Quilt Makers category at Quilts by the Lake in Lakeland, Florida this past weekend with her Dance of the Butterflies. She's 14 years old and has been studying Philippa's beginner quilter class and the binding and piping class. And I don't know whether everybody can see on there, she's got lovely piping around the edges. The judge loved her piping. She finished off the wall hanging with edge-to-edge quilting full of butterflies. I think that smile will last a long time.
So Laura, we don't know your granddaughter's name.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, do we? Sorry,
It's Hannah.
Oh yes, I can see it there. Yes, sorry, Hannah. Well, Hannah at 14, that is amazing, and you both must be absolutely thrilled to bits, and we are delighted for you. I mean, it is absolutely what we want to see. I always think that, you know, you have that early success and you do well, it just spurs you on to keep going and really explore this as much as possible. She's done a fantastic job with her choice of fabrics, her piecing, the drama. It looks amazing with the black background, that lovely splash of colour with the piping and everything about it. She's a very, very worthy winner. So you must pass on our congratulations to add to all the ones that she will already have had, and tell her to keep going. The world is her oyster.
Okay, so well done, Hannah. Now, I think this is the last question. I hope we've got through to the last question, and this is from Antari. And we have a picture with this one, which I was about to tee up. See if I got it right. There we go. So this is obviously a miniature quilt, and those of you that have taken Philippa's miniature class will recognise many of the features of this. I'm currently working on the miniature project. I already have ideas on the appliques, and apart from the centre blocks, the flower, I know how I want to quilt it. Without giving too much away, I'm planning on incorporating a bit of hand embroidery, stylised flower shapes, but I would welcome ideas on how to jazz up and quilt the centre blocks. FYI, for your information, the centre block is reverse appliqued. Thank you so much. Oh, she's not watching tonight, but she's going to be watching on catch up.
Okay, so it looks beautiful, Antari. So this is the project from our miniature class. So it is less than 30 centimetres, less than 12 inches. So it's quite small. Those little log cabin blocks are very detailed, and Antari has made a beautiful job with that. The actual project has more applique in the borders, and that is what Antari is referring to. But she feels that that central lilac area is not dramatic enough, and it's too kind of solid, because she's got very detailed piecing there, hasn't she, in those blocks. So I think that it is line work, perhaps 1/8 of an inch apart, and it will echo the piecing. So she can radiate out in different ways, but she can add colour with her actual thread. So, you know, she could start with a dark, she's got quite a, I think it's almost a black there. So she could do a circle of black around the middle, and then she could take that to a purple, and she could go lighter. She could do it in a completely different direction. So she could start on the outside tip of the petal, and she could do a curved line and curved lines that come in towards that central reverse applique. Antari, I did recognise it was reverse applique, bless you, but thank you for that. So I would really focus on detailed line work, maybe 1/8 of an inch apart. Choose some contrasting thread colours that pick out the thread colours you've used in your block, and that will break it up, add interest and increase a theme. So good luck with that, Antari. I'm sure we'll get to see it later on in the year.
Okay, so before we announce the winners, there's just a couple of comments that have come in. Lots of people saying well done to Hannah, I think it was, for
yeah, it is Hannah, yeah.
Few people, it seems like lots of people are saying with 70-year-old Singer featherweights.
Fantastic.
3 or 4 people have just said they love piecing on their 1950 featherweight, 70-year-old Singer featherweight. So lots of people still using those. And I think, yes, yes, that was it for now. So I think Peter is going to come and announce the winners of the prize draw, who will both be able to choose a class of their choice from Philippa's classes.
So if you haven't met Peter before, this is my husband Peter, and yesterday I said to him that I would I've always cut his hair. I don't always do it, but I often do it. And I said to him that I would cut his hair, and I completely forgot about it. So he had a late night haircut last night, didn't you, Peter? Yeah, probably the latest night haircut he's ever had, because I did say I would do it yesterday. So you're looking very dapper.
Massively exciting, yes. Yeah. Yes. The two winners are Anne McCrae.
Yeah.
You think McCrae?
I do.
All right. Pam Salengs.
I don't know, it's David's writing. He should have been a doctor. We cannot read what on earth he's put. It looks like SALLENGS.
Yeah,
okay.
Unusual name.
Okay, so anyway, she'll know it's her because it'll be the only one. Yeah.
So I will be sending an email to both of those winners asking. Oh, actually, I won't. Normally we have something to send, but in this case we won't. But I'll need to know which class you would like to be added to your library.
And so we have run over time a little bit, but we've covered lots of ground, and I hope that everything was of interest to you, or at least some of it anyway. Just a couple of things to say. So we are working on putting some little class bundles together, and from season 2, and quite a lot of you don't have season 2, we're going to put together a nice little bundle of 3 piecing projects. And the first one is the double wedding ring and pickle dish, a perennial favourite. that never fails to delight, and you will have, with all of these 3 classes that are going to go into this piecing bundle, you will have downloadable patterns, but I'm going to show you, or I do show you in the class, how to draft, so that with every one you can make your own pattern to a size that you like. So with the pickle dish and double wedding ring, there is foundation and freezer, paper construction techniques, and I show you everything from start to finish. The second class in that series is the Jack's chain quilt, which is a fabulous medallion design with the Y seams. Yeah, lots of work on fabric choices and design and placement, that kind of thing. And then the third class in that little bundle is the feathered star with the Lemoyne star centre. Again, patterns provided, but I also teach you how to draft. Lots of technique in that as well. It is a star within a star within a star. Is a great project. So that will be coming up. We'll let you know about that. And then the thing that we are, or the class that we are going to film tomorrow, a short class on this lovely cathedral window pin cushion, which I am going to show you how to make by hand and by machine. Lovely big squashy size. And then also, probably can't see that from where you are, but I'm also going to teach you how to make these lovely little tassels to embellish your pin cushion should you wish to. So Dave and I are going to be filming that tomorrow. We're hoping to get it filmed in a day or a day and a half, and then get that edited and ready for you to purchase should you wish to before too long. So I think that's all the news from my side. David, anything you need to add?
That's it for now, I think.
Okay, any news you want to add, Peter?
No.
Okay, the big news is that I just bought 2 sofas and a chair from an auction that I'm going to have free covered for the grand sum. Well, it was actually £26, so that's less than $40, and there's a little bit of commission to go on that. Less than £33. Can you imagine? We're renovating an apartment, a flat downstairs. I love a bargain. So anyway, that's the most exciting thing that's happened to me today, seeing as I didn't get to go to the singing lesson at the care home. So from all of us here, we've thoroughly enjoyed spending our time with you. We look forward to seeing and hearing more of you. Have a wonderful month of sewing, and we will see you towards the end of February. So from everybody at QQT, it is bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye everybody.